A locked door in an abandoned house should lead nowhere. But when Peter stepped inside, the room never ended. Peter always had a fascination with forgotten places. When he heard about the condemned house on Black Hollow Road, he couldn't resist exploring it. The locals whispered of strange occurrences, but Peter dismissed them as superstition. Then he found the door. It was in the basement, hidden behind old furniture. A plain wooden door, no handle, no keyhole. Just there. Something about it felt wrong. Against all logic, it opened when he pushed. On the other side was a hallway, long, dimly lit. He stepped inside, then another step, and another. The hallway stretched endlessly in both directions. No windows, no end. When he turned around, the door was gone. Panic set in. He ran, his footsteps echoing, swallowed by the void. He sprinted forward, backward, sideways, only to find himself exactly where he started. Time lost meaning. His phone's battery never drained, its clock never changed. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but his body didn't weaken. Then, the whispers began. You shouldn't be here. The voices slithered from the walls, forming words, with no mouths to speak them. Shapes moved in the corners of his vision, but whenever he turned, the hallway was empty, until it wasn't. A figure emerged from the shadows, a twisted reflection of Peter, distorted, stretched, wrong. Its lips didn't move, but he heard its voice inside his head. You are me. I am you, and we do not belong. He turned to run, but the floor shifted beneath him. The walls pulsed, the ceiling loomed closer, the hallway itself was alive. Then the figure smiled. The world inverted. The walls turned inside out. The floor swallowed him whole. He fell, not down, but through. He landed in the same hallway. Again. Only something was different. His phone buzzed in his pocket. The screen showed an incoming call, his own number. He hesitated, then answered. A deep, hollow voice whispered, You've been here before. His stomach churned. He glanced around, desperate for an escape. The shadows lengthened, thickening into something tangible, something moving. A door appeared at the end of the hall. It wasn't the one he came through. A choice. Stay in the endless room forever, or step through and risk something worse. He ran. The door loomed ahead, but with each step, the hallway stretched longer. The whispers grew louder, merging into a chorus of distorted echoes. The floor trembled beneath his feet. The air grew thick, pressing against his skin like unseen hands. He reached the door, pulled it open. Darkness beyond. Not a room, not another hallway, just void. A voice, his own, whispered from within, You never left. Hands, cold and wrong, reached from the blackness, dragging him forward. The door slammed shut behind him. Days later, the house was demolished, the basement reduced to rubble. But sometimes, people walking by claim they hear footsteps beneath the earth. And if you listen closely, you can hear someone whisper, Let me out. Not all doors are meant to be opened. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. But be careful which rooms you enter. Some never let you leave. The Mariana Trench is the deepest place on Earth. We thought we knew what was down there. We were wrong. Dr. Evelyn Carter had dedicated her life to the ocean's mysteries. When her team sent an autonomous drone into a newly discovered trench within the Mariana, she expected darkness, pressure, and silence. What they found should not have been alive. The drone's feed flickered, then stabilized. At first, it was just rock formations, strange but natural. Then, something moved. A shadow, too large to be real, slid across the trench floor. Tentacle-like appendages coiled and uncoiled in the silt. But it wasn't the shape that terrified her. It was the eye. A vast, unblinking eye, embedded in the ocean floor, staring directly into the camera. Then the feed cut to black. Panic gripped the research vessel. Evelyn ordered the drone to surface, but the controls were unresponsive. The pressure readings fluctuated wildly, then stabilized. The drone was rising, the sonar pinged, revealing movement, something enormous ascending with it. The water outside the vessel darkened. The sky, once clear, now churned with unnatural clouds. Static hissed through their radios, interspersed with a deep, rhythmic sound. Breathing, then a voice. "You were not meant to find us." The ocean swelled, a massive wave lifting the ship like a toy. The surface warped, the water parting, not from the storm, but from something beneath, something rising. Evelyn's mind fractured at the sight. It wasn't a creature, it wasn't a god, it was an opening, a gateway in the ocean itself, leading somewhere deeper than the sea, darker than space. And something was coming through. The sonar screamed as the readings became incomprehensible. The water outside the vessel lost its familiar blue, replaced with an abyssal black that swallowed light whole. The crew shouted, scrambling for control, but Evelyn could only stare at the churning void below. The eye was still watching. Then, more eyes. Dozens. Hundreds. Flickering open in the darkness, each embedded in unseen, shifting masses that defied shape and reason. The trench was not a place. It was a mouth, and they were on its tongue. A crew member screamed. The vessel lurched sideways as something brushed against it, a limb, impossibly vast, yet delicate as it traced the metal hull. The voice returned, but this time it was inside their minds. "You should not be here." Evelyn's breath hitched. The voice was not angry, it was not hostile, it was amused. The vessel's alarm shrieked, metal groaning as the pressure spiked beyond known limits. The ocean itself pulled them downward, into the trench, into the open maw of something older than time. She pressed record on her logbook, her shaking fingers etching words that may never be read. "We were wrong. It sees us now." Then, silence. The research vessel was found adrift weeks later, the crew missing. Only one thing remained. Evelyn's logbook, waterlogged but intact. The last entry read, "The ocean is not ours. It never was. Some depths should never be explored." If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. But don't look too long into the abyss. It might notice. The night sky is beautiful, vast, endless, filled with light from stars long dead. But what if something out there was looking back? Dr. Elias Voss had spent his life staring into the cosmos. As an astronomer, he found comfort in the immensity of space, the cold logic of celestial bodies. But when his observatory picked up an unfamiliar signal, an impossible frequency, comfort turned to terror. The signal was structured, deliberate, not random static, not background radiation. Someone was speaking. He spent weeks decoding it, mapping its fluctuations, assigning meaning to its patterns. And then, one night, the message resolved. "We see you." His blood ran cold. He had expected numbers, physics, equations, not words, certainly not words meant for us. Elias shared his findings with no one. He told himself it was an anomaly, a misinterpretation. But the message changed. "We are close." He turned his telescope toward the source, a nameless void beyond the farthest recorded galaxies. What he saw was wrong. The stars bent around something vast, something that shifted outside the boundaries of perception. It wasn't a planet. It wasn't a black hole. It was watching. Then the dreams began. Visions of endless, writhing voids, spirals of shifting light, voices, not one, but millions, whispering, screaming, chanting. Each night, he awoke gasping, his skin wet with sweat that smelled of salt and decay. His reflection in the mirror stretched and distorted, warping in ways the human form should not. And the signal, grew louder. One final message appeared on his screen. Look outside. Hands trembling, Elias turned to the window. The night sky above his home had changed. The stars had moved. They weren't scattered anymore. They formed a shape, an eye, and it blinked. A shadow passed over the earth. Something vast, eclipsing the moon, distorting reality itself. The walls of his observatory rippled as if they were breathing. His mind cracked, unraveling like string pulled too tight. The signal's pitch changed. The numbers he had spent weeks analyzing now scrawled across his walls in pulsing, glowing light. Equations beyond human comprehension filled his mind, bleeding into his thoughts, replacing them. He understood now. They weren't just watching, they were waiting. A presence loomed behind him. He turned slowly, his body moving as if guided by unseen hands. A figure stood there, its form flickering between shapes, between realities. It was him. It was not him. It was the voice from the signal made flesh. We see you. Now you see us. The universe folded inward. Time slipped like water through trembling fingers. He wasn't screaming, but something was. The sky outside swirled into a gaping maw of darkness, a chasm stretching into infinity. He stepped forward. Or was he pulled? The next morning, Elias was gone. His observatory remained untouched, his notes scattered across his desk. His telescope pointed at a patch of sky that no longer existed. Sometimes, on clear nights, astronomers still pick up faint echoes of his signal. But no one dares decode the message. Some things are not meant to be seen. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. But don't look too long at the stars. They might start looking back. Maps tell us where things are, but what if you found a place that wasn't supposed to be there? Nathan was driving home when his GPS rerouted him through a town he didn't recognize. It had no name, no history. It shouldn't have existed. But there it was. The streets were empty, the houses perfectly intact, yet abandoned. The air smelled stale, unmoving. As he drove through, the buildings seemed familiar, too familiar. Then he saw his childhood home. It was impossible. He had grown up in another state, hundreds of miles away. But there it was, identical in every detail. Even the old tire swing his father had built swayed gently, though there was no wind. His phone buzzed, a new notification from an unknown sender. Come inside. Nathan's breath hitched as the front door creaked open on its own. The house smelled exactly as he remembered. Dusty books, wood polish, something baking in the oven. But something was wrong. The pictures on the walls weren't his family. The faces were almost familiar, but distorted, stretched, watching. Then the TV switched on. It showed live footage of him, standing in the living room, a whisper from the hallway. You've always been here. Nathan ran, back to his car, tires screeching as he sped out of town. He checked his GPS. Nothing. No route, no location, no record that he had ever been there. But the town was still in his rearview mirror, closer. He blinked, and the road ahead changed. The buildings were back. The streetlights flickered on. He was driving into the town again. He could never leave. Nathan slammed on the brakes. He yanked the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. The sky darkened. The air thickened. The street ahead stretched longer, looping back on itself. His dashboard flickered. His radio whispered, "Home!" The car's engine died. The town surrounded him, houses watching with their dark windows. Nathan pounded on the door, his breath quick and shallow. A figure stood at the edge of the street. It looked like him. It was him. It smiled. Nathan's vision blurred. The figure stepped closer, one foot dragging, shadow stretching unnaturally long beneath the streetlight. You never left, it whispered. The world folded in on itself. The pavement dissolved into mist. The town pulsed, as if breathing. Nathan stumbled backward, but the figure mirrored him exactly. He clutched his phone, desperate, shaking hands, typing out a message to someone. Anyone. No service. The figure reached out, fingers brushing against his cheek. Nathan vanished. Days later, his car was found abandoned by the roadside. No footprints, no sign of a struggle. Only his phone remained, displaying one final message. Welcome home. Not every place belongs on a map. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, but be careful where the road takes you. Some towns don't let you leave.